Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, it takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Alright folks, for this night-ending bonus, I am going to share with you a variety of just terrifying encounters, Dogman and Bigfoot, but also share some video evidence with you as well. Hey Jeff, my name is LS. Even though it's not exciting and long, I've got an encounter for you. I'm 36 years old now. At the time of my sighting when it happened, I think it was about 12 to 14 years ago, my dad had a sighting with me. He has since passed away, and I live in his and my old childhood home, now where the sighting occurred. It was late one night, around 2 in the morning. I happened to be staying with my dad that night. We were both awakened by a sound of an infant newborn screaming at the top of its lungs. Only the sound we heard was literally vibrating our insides. It was so loud, it should have hurt our ears, but somehow it didn't. We could tell the sound was coming from the shed behind the house, where he parked his trailer and one of his trucks. We stood at the back door, scared, whispering to each other what we thought it could be. The sound never stopped, mind you. It had been about 5 minutes at this point since we first awoke. We turned the floodlight on in the back of the house, and the noise keeps going. We finally work up the nerve to step onto the back deck, and me and my dad both had 12 gauges with double-aught buck aimed toward the shed. Soon as we stepped out, the noise stopped. About 10 seconds after we stepped out, something absolutely massive and pitch black in color bounds from the shed into the woods in about 3 or 4 leaps. Now the woods is at least 45 to 50 yards from the shed. It was so fast it seemed unnatural. Also, we made out that the front stood higher than the rear of the animal. It stayed on all fours the whole time we saw it. It did have a medium-length tail. We didn't see the eyes. It moved so fast it was unreal, and it didn't make out much. I live out in the woods, so it's even dark, even with a floodlight. Clark County, Alabama. I can tell you this. It was no black bear. I've seen them. This thing was massive. It was no panther. Again, way too big. Also, I don't know if Bigfoot runs on all fours, so I'm thinking Dogman. I also hear massive, deep howling in the woods, so it's not coyotes. I've been around them my entire life, and I know what they sound like. I still hear the howling this day at night. Deep in the woods, it sounds massive. I also hear weird ape, canid sounds in the woods. Also, paranormal things have happened around here. Anyway, that is my one time I actually saw a creature. I hear it several times a year, though. Thanks for your time. I've found large canine tracks. I'm going to try and take some pics next time, and I'll send them to you. I'm adding this a few days later. Me and my dad, before we went out and stood there, tried our best and try and think of what it could be. So many things went through our mind as we stood there whispering to each other and listening to this god-awful sound. We should have been deaf, but we were not. Like I said, it literally vibrated our insides, so weird and hard to explain. It didn't hurt, though. It actually felt kind of relaxing in a weird way. The vibrating, but God, it was a scary sound. Best thing we could think of before stepping out onto the deck was, I said, Dad, it has to be some sort of drug addict or some sorry SOB had a baby and didn't want it and left it under the shed with a large electronic megaphone by the newborn's mouth as it screamed and wailed for dear life. That was the closest thing I could think of that it sounded like, and my dad agreed. And we stepped out, even though we both knew it wasn't a human baby. I remember more as I keep dwelling on it. I tried to send this a few days ago, sent it to the wrong email. I love your show. Keep up the good work. I've been woken to the truth for about 10 years now. Not just on cryptids and paranormal, but the world we live in, and spiritual stuff as well. Thank you. So, really quick, once again, that statement where it's probably not good enough to put on the channel, people say, because it's short or it's not violent enough or whatever. That really disturbs me more than anything, because in my eyes, I think that once we've seen these creatures, that's enough. We don't need any more, just the details of what it looks like, what it did, how it acted, we are seeing something that we are told from everyone we know, from our parents, our teachers, TV, everybody, that these things don't exist. I've heard of Sasquatch running quadruped. I'm sure many of you have as well. So it may have been a Sasquatch, but the wailing baby sound it's either or. But we certainly know it's terrifying, right? All right, on to tonight's second Alabama subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, my name is MS. I was born and raised in the small town of Thomasville, Alabama, and have lived there my entire life. I'm 59 years old, and I'm a registered nurse. I grew up on a dirt road in an old house that my great-grandfather had built. There was thick woods behind the house and across the dirt road in front of the house. This land is still owned by my family. The old house sadly burnt down when lightning struck it years ago. I had 2 younger brothers and 2 sisters. We would play for hours on end in these woods, on both sides of the road. We would even venture out for a considerable distance to get to the creek that was in the middle of the woods, so that we could collect arrowheads and beads that we would find along the creek. One summery day, all of us and 2 of my cousins were playing hide and seek across the road at the edge and somewhat into the woods. There had been at one time an old house that belonged to my great aunt situated there, but it had been torn down many years ago, and It was all debris. Brick from the house was piled up, with several feet of brick and broken blocks sitting on top of the pile. I was about 8 years old. I was it, and had to start counting till 50 while everyone else hid. I leaned against some of the bricks facing toward the road with my head down and counting. When I reached 50, I ran forward about 40 or so feet and looked around. I didn't see any signs of anyone, so I turned around and ran back toward the brick pile. I looked out toward the wood line past the bricks, and something caught my eye at the very top of the pile. I was completely horrified to see a face of something that had jet black, long, disheveled hair and black hair on its face, as well as what looked to be a beard and hair above its lip. Its eyes were open very wide and were very large. This thing was staring right at me, and its eyes were black as its hair. I was so scared that I couldn't move. I kept my eyes on this creature or whatever the whole time I stood there frozen, after what seemed to be an eternity. I watched as the face very slowly eased itself down behind this brick pile, and when I could no longer see anything of it, I slowly eased. I came to my senses. I'm sorry, guys. I came to my senses and turned around and ran as fast as my little feet could carry me toward the house. As it happened, all the other kids had decided to go across the road and hide, so that I would have a harder time finding them. I never said anything to my mom about what I saw. As a matter of fact, I never told anyone about my encounter until fairly recently. I think my fear was just so overwhelming that I couldn't bring myself to talk about it. As far as I remember, I never did go near that part of the woods again until I was a teen. I know for a fact this was not a mean trick by my mother or dad, or by my uncle or aunt. Both men were gone at work, and my mom nor aunt were the type to pull a prank. My mom was in the kitchen cooking when I ran into the house. I still don't know what it was that I saw. Now that I'm grown and know what scientists proclaim a Neanderthal looks like, that's the closest thing I've ever seen to what I saw that day in the edge of the woods. Huh. I put, wow, that was creepy. Do you remember if this thing had any clothes or anything like that? I don't remember seeing any type of clothing. All I could see was its head and the top part of its neck. To me, that sounds like a feral person more than anything. Which, in my eyes, feral people are just as scary than Dogman and Bigfoot and anything else. These Neanderthal-like primitive people living in the outskirts of humanity is insane. You know, my dad and I were just talking about feral people the other day, and how if a small group of these people caught you, you'd probably never be seen again. I did ask him, actually, because he's got a lot of little weird stories, my dad. And I said, do you think there's any feral in the Adirondacks? And his exact words were, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't either, to be honest with you. I think if there's enough woods with enough food source and water source and cave, I think there will be feral people. So, alright, moving on. The next encounter is, there's a little bit of information about this person. stuff that I can't really disclose, but her father did work at Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, and he had some access, let's just say that. So, and she thinks that part of one of her experiences has something to do with where her dad worked and what he did. So, here goes. We lived in Marshall County, a very small town. We did not live close to this town, but we were still considered part of it, so that you can get the picture of what it's like. We lived on a long dirt road with only 5 houses spread out over the area. All the houses were built on the same side of the road across the street, and behind us were woods. All there was huge pastures beside and a wooded area. Across and down from our home, we had the only 2-story house on that road. Why this detail is relevant will make more sense about my encounter. The land was 2-tier, big backyard, sizable front yard. There was a rock wall with a flower bed and steps to the upper tier of the yard. Fast forward 2 or 3 months later, my dad had gotten some chickens, and in mornings we went out to feed and water them, and the chickens would be dead. They were inside of their chicken coop with a latch on it to keep the other wildlife from getting away. There had been a chicken coop with a latch on it to keep the other wild animals away. There had also been something like 100 chickens, and they had all been taken, and sometimes, like I said, dead. I remember one morning going out with our housekeeper. There were chickens with their intestines pulled out inside the coop, while others were just missing and gone. It was then decided it was the neighbor's tomcat who was doing this. So the neighbor and my brother decided to hunt down this cat and shoot it. During this, I was sent inside because, of course, I was crying, telling my dad not to let this happen. I have always loved animals, and I do believe what they were doing was wrong. Then a week goes by, and some more chickens were being killed and disappearing. Then it was decided during the second week to go ahead and kill the rest of the chickens before there was not any more left. Some were not fully grown yet, and some were half the size as the older ones were. Yet the decision was made. There was a predator out there that is able to get them, and no one could figure out what it was. So it was the beast to harvest them before none of them were left. So it was best to harvest them before none of them were left. A week or two later, I had started to hear what I thought were dogs howling outside near or in our front yard. I was awoken almost every night. It was not just one howl, but many, like it was a pack. I also knew nobody had any dogs anywhere on our street. Dogs were a luxury back in 1966. It was nothing like today where a lot of people have dogs, or many dogs, or one dog or many dogs. Sorry. This is where my encounter differs. I woke up to the howling outside again, but this time was different than the other nights. There was a wall heater in my room. The red coils in the heater were bright red, and the whole room glowed. The room was so hot, I got up to turn it down. The closer I moved toward it, the hotter it seemed to become. The heat was so intense I could not get near it. It looked like the whole wall was on fire. The red light was not natural at all. I moved to my side of the room, away from the heat. I just stood there for a while. I was scared and didn't know what I was supposed to do. I jumped into the bed beside my sister and threw the sheet over my head. Now, it wasn't just the howling, but my room was unbearably hot and glowing red. This continued for a couple of nights, the howling outside, the wall glowing red, the heat making it so hot and never being able to get close enough to turn it down. After the third night of the hot, glowing red wall, I asked my dad if he was coming into my room and turning the heat up while I was asleep, and he said no. I then asked Miss Katie if she had been going into her room, and she said no. I told them it was coming on at night and making our room very hot. My dad said, "You know it will come on by itself if it gets too cold in your room." So, the 6-year-old genius that I was decided to turn the heater off, and that I did. The night, no red glow or horrible heat waking us up, or the next night. I was diligent in making sure the heater was off every night. I made sure the dial was turned all the way to the left. Third night, double-checked the dial, and yes, it was in the off position. I lied down and fell asleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I heard the howling again. The wall was glowing red, and it felt hotter than all the other times before. I knew I had to turn the heater off, so I got up to see if it had been turned on somehow. As I moved toward the wall, I can't get near it. Again, it was so hot. It was burning my face, my arm and hand, where I had tried to block my face from the heat. I bent down to see if I could see any person, and there was I bent down to see if I could at least see the dial, and there was no checking it. It was just too hot. The howling seemed to grow louder. It sounded like it was right outside of my window. I saw movement in the window. I started to straighten back up. The curtains were only partially open. I couldn't move. I was scared. So I tilted my head a little to the side so I could see if something was really by our window. As I leaned closer, I thought it was probably just my reflections. Then the yellow eyes were visible in the teeth. They were very large teeth. I could see its claws resting on the outside of the windowsill. Its ears were like those of a German shepherd, but more pointy. It seemed like we looked at each other for a long time. What caused me to run was he seemed to smile at me. It was not a smile like a nice hello, nice to meet you. It was as if he was letting me know he had seen me, and he knew I had seen him, and then ran to the side of my room and covered completely up. I peeked out, and he was still standing in my window. His head seemed to be turned slightly, as if he knew I was trying to peek out. As I was looking at it, I started to look around my room, and there was the red grid. It was completely surrounding all 4 walls of my room. At that time, I thought it was a red fence. It also overlaid the glowing red wall. At first, I thought it was part of the glowing red, that I was going to be cooked. As I got older, I figured out that it was a grid of some type. Also, to my shame, my babysitter was sleeping by the window. I didn't pull her away from the window. I just hid under the covers, looking out every once in a while, hoping this complete nightmare would just go away. I did fear that it was going to come through the window. I didn't know where it went. I do know the window was on the 2nd story. It vanished and was gone, just as quiet as when it appeared. The red grid came back a few nights, the howling became distant, and then completely stopped. I started to have night terrors after that. To this day, my kids know if they wake me up to stand from a distance. They have received a phone, remote control, and other items launched at them. Nightmares of this thing standing over me, physically holding my wrist, are common. I get to see him very clearly, and what makes him so bad is coming out of sleep, opening my eyes, and there is a moment where it is there. I punch at it to keep it away from me, and then it's gone. My dad remarried. She hated where we lived and moved us all back to Huntsville, where I never heard or saw anything like that. When I was 12, we moved to Washington State. Before anyone asks, nope, never seen, smelled, or heard Bigfoot. In fact, up here, have not run into what is referred to the Big Three, though I've seen some weird things. Thanks for reading, Jeff. My son and I had an experience with a Sasquatch. We were walking in an unpopular part of Patapsco Park in Maryland. At first we were searching for ruins of a town washed away in the 70s. He was 15 at the time and we were not having any luck. Right from the beginning I got the creeps. We were in the middle of nowhere forest and we came across an empty ball field with a metal bleacher and a shack that was open with dated equipment in there. As we were walking through the field, I felt scared, like there were eyes all around us. I didn't say a thing. About 30 minutes in, we realized we were in the wrong area. I was thinking, oh good, I failed my angry teenager again. He is going to forever think I cannot do anything right. We see a burned up pine tree, and I stop to take a picture. My son says, "This is lame, let's go." This is where things get real fast. We turned around, walked 20 steps. He picks up a stick and bangs it on a tree. I look down and see a deep footprint in the semi-dry mud. The tracks were not there when we walked up. We take pictures. I jump up and down to try and recreate the indentation, and I cannot do so. I then realize that we are being followed. Panic starts to set in. I declare a swift departure. I think to myself, is my child safer in front or behind me? That is a really crappy thing to have to think about. I push him in front of me. He has a machete and I have that stupid stick. We start to run and walk back. This is what we hear. Rustling alongside the path, my son sees an arm. We hear the sound of a jug. You know the sound that you hear when someone's blowing on a jug top? We see two different size prints, small ones and large ones. We run by what looks like bedding in thick, cool grass. We start to feel safe getting closer to our car. My son beats the stick against a tree. At that point, a giant scream erupts behind us. I grab the stick and scream at him, "Stop hitting the tree and run." We make it back. I'm repeating the words I wish that never happened to us. He's repeating, "That's the best thing that's ever happened to me." We get home. I'm virtually in hysterics with stress. My son said, "We have to tell someone." Oh man, I think I can't deny it. My son was with me. Thus began my contact with a Bigfoot specialist. I would say to my husband, if the Bigfoot people call, tell him I'll be back at 7:30. It was 2 years ago. I have thought about it a lot. I believe them to be real and not real at the same time. Somehow I think they are spirits of the forest. I also no longer care if people believe me or not. It happened, and I have nothing to gain from this. I also told the Bigfoot people to stop telling people to bang on trees. They truly hate it. Tonight's first video evidence is a Bigfoot in kind of a ravined area. It is very interesting. Give it a look-see. All right, guys. So that little video clip, I feel, is very compelling. I'm not going to stand by and say it's 100% legit, but compelling and interesting. I'm leaving it up to you guys for your opinions. Tonight's second encounter. When I was 15 years old back in 1973, we lived on an 80-acre farm in the Ozarks of northwest Arkansas. That back then would have been considered rural, but in reality it was only about 15 to 20 minutes from town. We raised poultry for a local company. We had a long chicken house. Beside the end in near the driveway was a yard light that had pegs on it, so when the bulb burned out, you could climb up the pole and change the bulb. I went outside at around 7 p.m. to feed our Alaskan husky, but unlike usual, he's not at the back door waiting. I heard him whining and followed the sound toward the edge of our house, where we had a shed and our root cellar. He was under the building, having dug out a spot that he would not come out when I called. That was when I smelled what I thought was a skunk. Figuring that it was what had run him under the shed, I stood up, and then I felt as if I was being watched. So I turned in a circle to see if there was a visible skunk. As I faced toward the chicken house, I saw a tall creature with long reddish hair all over its body. Its face was human-like and covered with a long beard and long red hair. I could see it clearly as it stood underneath the light, which later my mom measured by the pegs I could see that night, and the creature was about 8 feet tall. I froze in shock. I knew what I was looking at. Never a doubt. And it was looking at me. I glanced back toward the house to see how far I was from the back door, and then back to it. It was holding something in its hand that was nearest to the poultry house, and I noticed that it was a dead chicken. The next day we saw where the screen on the poultry house had been pulled back. This creature and I stood facing each other for a few seconds, which felt like hours, and then it turned and gently walked 10 feet to the road gate that enclosed our field, stepped over it. At 15, I was about 4'11", and knew the top of the gate was at my eye level. After it crossed over, it took a few steps and then looked back at me and then just kind of walked or loped into the field, and I couldn't see it anymore in the dark. But being a girl, that look back made me scream bloody murder. My mom came out with the shotgun, as we had seen a panther a few weeks before by our pond, and she had placed the gun by the back door. After a few moments of jabbering nonsense, I was able to tell her what I had seen. That was when she said she had heard something scratching on the screen the night before. I was relieved to have been believed, but refused to feed the dog or go out after dark anymore. Later, we learned a neighbor whose property backed up to ours also saw the creature. After growing up, I often think back to that experience and what it felt like. I was shocked and confused at what I was seeing. I think it may have just been in shock seeing me, but oddly at the time, up until it turned and looked back at me, I never felt fear. I did not sense danger, and when it looked at me, I didn't see anything in its eyes that were dark. But I never forgot the exact details to this day. I don't believe they are monkeys or gorillas. It was far too human-like and intelligent-looking. And just like other animals, when their territory is encroached upon, they'll try and scare you off. I think people looking for them have less of a chance to see them than the ones who are not looking for them do. Tonight's second video clip is some very strange footage of what appears to be possibly a crawler or some sort of, quotes, alien. You guys decide. All right, guys, that was the second video. I'm really not sure what it was, but it could have been a crawler, could have been some kind of alien. You guys decide. On to tonight's final encounter. My dad shared a lot of experiences of what happened to him throughout his life. One in particular took place somewhere in the 60s or maybe 70s, long before I was born. I'll do my best to recall what he relayed to me. Unfortunately, I can't ask him, as he died 9 years ago. It was the summertime, somewhere in Northern California. It was some sort of campsite, and it was near a big lake. I honestly don't remember the name. I was a little girl when he shared this with me. He was camping with a few of his brothers. I believe he told me that they only had a truck to camp in, so they used the back of the truck bed to have two sleep there, and my dad slept in the front seat. Well, he and my uncles were sleeping when my dad was awoken to a foul odor. He wasn't sure what it was because he hadn't smelled that before, as he and my uncles were very outdoorsy and camped all the time. He had the window cracked open, and that's why he was able to smell it. He said that when he woke up, he saw this huge, hairy, man-like creature walking up to the truck. He didn't know what it was, but suspected that it may have been a Sasquatch. When it reached the truck, he said he started to sniff through the cracked part of the window. If I remember correctly, it startled my uncles as well. But they were pretty scared and tried their best not to move because they were more out in the open than my dad. Well, all three of them pretty much hid in their sleeping bags, and when this creature realized that they were in there, it started to make this aggressive grunting sound and began shaking the truck. It was not a small truck, so this thing had a good amount of strength to it. My dad said he was doing that for quite some time. But once it realized that they weren't going to react or even move, it walked off. Once it was gone from the truck, they could hear it in the distance, some loud screams and such. They believed it was angry, but didn't do anything else physical, thank God. And there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this night ending bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go. And honestly, what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.